On behalf of Bangla Academy, I extend a very warm welcome to you all to today's seminar on the politics of literature. We are deeply honored to have among us Professor Dr. Firdaus Azim, Chairperson of the Department of English and Humanities, Prague University, as the chair of today's seminar. Our keynote speaker is none other than Mr. Zia Haidar Rahman, the distinguished British novelist and broadcaster. And to open the program, Professor Dr. Muhammad Azim, Director General of Bangla Academy, will kindly deliver the welcome address. May I now request the chair of today's session, the keynote speaker, and the Director General of Bangla Academy to please come to the stage and take their seats.
On behalf of the Bangla Academy, I would like to extend my gratitude to Zia Haidar Rahman for agreeing to be our keynote speaker. He presents the written speech with effort despite his busy schedule. I hope we can spend time together through meaningful experiences, combining his creative literary experience and contemplative practice. The program will begin with the main speaker's keynote speech. Afterward, Chairperson Professor Firdaus Azim and Speaker Zia Haidar Rahman will exchange views, followed by a question-answer session. The meeting is expected to conclude with the Chairperson's closing speech.
Zia Haidar Rahman claims that although he is used to the Silabi language, he is not very proficient in standard Bengali. We have come to know that he has been learning standard Bengali for quite some time. In this situation, although we will be conducting today's program mainly in English, you are welcome to ask questions in either English or Bengali.
Or Silabi.
Or Silabi. That's fine. Professor Firdaus Azim has promised to help the questioner in this regard. Moreover, she is also supposed to use a little Bengali in the conversational part, as we discussed before. I hope that the language will not be an obstacle to our attention in this program. As you may know, Zia Haidar Rahman is a British citizen of Bangladeshi origin. He achieved literary fame through his novel In the Light of What We Know, published in 2014. His novel has been particularly appreciated as a special examination of human existence. But he did not confine himself within what we can name literature. Skilled in various subjects including mathematics, economics and law, Zia Haidar Rahman's field of work is also very diverse. He has worked all over the world during Dhaka University's Muzaffar Ahmad Hall. So far, I recall that the lecture was organized by the English Department of Dhaka University. Was published in 2014 that he became famous. I was fascinated by the rhythm of his speech, connected with all of it, but several things touched me deeply. If I am not imposing my words and thoughts on him, then it can be said that he expressed work within a structural formation. The culture is such that people work or are work under the supervision of another person. He also pay attention to who is saying. Frequently used his conclusions in my own words and writings. Although I am not sure whether I imposed my thoughts on him or not. I read his ability to describe the culture and condition of Bangladesh so accurately, particularly given his short stay here, as a novelist observation. I believe that I and we will have a similar experience today. He will speak on the topic of politics of literature. I assume that he will speak based on his own experience. Literature is political by default. When politics is not directly its subject, then perhaps even more so. On the other hand, the trend of literary analysis over the last 100 years has demonstrated such activity and skill in uncovering the internal and external politics of literature that people's awareness in this regard has increased significantly. There is no shortage of interest either. If we see politics not as party politics or even class politics, but as a diverse expression and awareness of power relation, then the politics of literature will become as multi-layered and interesting as life itself. Moreover, the production, marketing, and consumption of literature also have various political aspects. If we add to these the aspect of linguistic dominance or the relationship between the dominance of capital and the dominance of certain literatures, or the aspect of representational politics, then there is no doubt that the matter will become more complex and enlightening. I would like to extend a special invitation for your active participation in these subsequent 3 sessions of today's program. Thank you all again.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we move to the most anticipated part of the session. May I now request our keynote speaker, Mr. Zia Haider Rahman, to deliver his speech on the politics of literature. Zia Haider Rahman.
Well, let me first say, can you hear me? Oh, I check. How's that? Can you see me? Thank you. First, let me extend my thanks to the Bangla Academy, and in particular to Muhammad Azam and of course to Fairness. I'm very honored to be here, and I also know that it is unusual, not an exception, it is unusual to have an English speaker. I beg your forgiveness, because I know that you would probably rather hear from someone speaking Bengali. But I am very honored to be here. Thank you very much. I don't expect this to take more than 30 minutes, but if it does go on, it won't go on beyond 40. In the film, The Third Man, the character of Harry Lime, played by Orson Welles, shares an observation with his interlocutor. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. But they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did they produce? The cuckoo clock. The novelist Graham Greene, who co-wrote the script, describes this as the best line of the film and says that Welles wrote it. The line has, of course, come to stand for the proposition that art emerges from conditions of suffering and social strife. I must confess that I have quoted the passage in that vein. In an interview in the New York Times shortly after Britain's referendum decision to leave the European Union, 5 writers and artists, including Philip Pullman and Elif Shafak, were asked what impact Brexit would have on the arts. All the artists but one took the view that Brexit would have an adverse effect on their respective disciplines. But quoting the third man, I offered the view that the ardors of Brexit awaiting us might potentially usher in a golden age of English literature, pushing writers out of the complacency and complicity that has marked much of 20th century British literature. But I was wrong. Literary art requires certain positive conditions to flourish. The conditions of a healthy literary culture are precisely the conditions of a healthy political culture. Of course, we can find examples of artists who wrote in adverse circumstances, but these are the exceptions and not the rule. They do not upset the overall picture, which is that literature requires an atmosphere of imaginative freedom, even when the limits of that freedom are not tested by a given work. I want to explore those political conditions here because, to be clear, the political conditions of literature are the political conditions of a free society. I should tell you, by the way, in case you haven't spotted the errors already, that Orson Welles, or rather his character of Harry Lime, was wrong, factually wrong. The cuckoo clock was not invented in Switzerland, but in Bavaria, in what is now Germany. Moreover, Switzerland was in no way an island of tranquility amid the turmoil that has marked almost all of European history over the 500 years reference. Still, those sentences make for excellent dialogue, especially in the hands of Orson Welles' acting talent. I recently had an open-air speaking engagement in Dhaka, when the arrival of rain forced the gathering indoors to continue the Q&A session in a much more intimate setting, with everyone crowded in. The Q&As had evolved into something closer to a conversation with the audience, and I hope we can have that here today as well. At one point, I posed a question. I observed that Bangladesh had deposed a tyrant and brought in an interim government staffed largely by Dhaka liberal NGO types. But I asked the audience if they now felt they could speak freely and air their views. Of course not. Heads nodded, and in the intimacy of the setting, the voices concurred. They could not speak freely. When the term freedom of expression is invoked, very often what is under discussion is the exercise of state powers. Obviously, for more than a decade, an authoritarian government put the focus on such powers. Quite explicitly and unashamedly, Hasina's regime severely curtailed the rights of people to speak freely, both through draconian legislation and through the deployment of thugs and a subservient police. In 2014, I delivered a lecture to an overcrowded auditorium at Dhaka University. The title of the talk was Bangladesh, the Land of Dead Ideas. I criticized the Awami government generally and its rigged courts specifically. But the bulk of my talk focused on what I perceived to be a tangled knot of political and social constraints on freedom of expression. A knot that throttled the development of ideas at birth. Hence, as I indicated then, the title. Maybe in the Q&A I can say a little bit more about that because it's relevant as much today as it was then. More about hierarchies, about the young, and about the status of expertise in this country. At dawn on the morning after my Dhaka University tour, I returned to the UK, and 2 days later my father passed away. For the next 10 days I was quite unaware of the furore that followed my lecture. 2 weeks later, I received the video of the talk recorded by Dhaka University. The university had not published the material which would have shown the outcry to be utterly unfounded. As I discovered, the talk had been grossly misrepresented in the press, a point that can easily be verified by watching the video, which is available on my Facebook page. This was a press that was already hopping in and out of bed with the regime. By then, it was too late. Still, it's important to note that not a single person who attended my talk, or who has since seen the video, not one person has expressed disagreement, let alone provided a reasoned rebuttal of any of the points I made. Quite the opposite. The fact that the Awami regime has been replaced by a largely impotent and ineffectual interim government has revealed that the limitations on free expression in Bangladesh run much, much deeper than state repression. And in fact, those social and socio-political constraints on expression and on imagination have today been laid bare. One might argue that we're to adjust to the new dispensation, and there are no doubt some who are so accustomed to ineffectual government that they see no purpose in ventilating their views on what is, after all, a temporary interim arrangement. But why? Why can't we say publicly that Ali Riaz has been a disaster? Or that Professor Yunus has proven to be a huge disappointment? After all, these are not elected politicians, and their tenure is coming to an end. Ali Riaz, some say, has already packed up shop and left Bangladesh. I don't know. Moreover, such views are widespread among the elite and professional classes and others, and are routinely shared. And these views are routinely shared in the privacy of homes. For heaven's sake, I have heard these views expressed by senior members of the interim government itself. The key point here is that everyone who says this does so as if these views are widely held, even affirming that these are dominant views. Yet the Bangladeshi press and news media has failed to hold the IG accountable in any meaningful way. In August of last year, in the first few days after the tyrant fled, I said to a friend that we should pay attention to how this interim government resources and staffs the press office in the first few days. Explaining my view, I said that given the suspension of Parliament and the retreat of party political activities, the government will face no daily source of accountability other than the press. Lo and behold, the press offices of the various advisors and the IG took woefully long to staff and never adequately. Moreover, it quickly became apparent that the chief advisor was unwilling to stand before the press and take questions. In October of last year, shortly after the chief advisor's shambolic interview with Voice of America, resulting in uproar in Bangladesh, I authored a full-page op-ed published in the Daily Star under the heading, "The government must make itself available to questions from the press." This required a full page because I made a detailed critique of the government's press function. I explained the need for the IG to get off the merry-go-round of pointless roundtables where important government announcements were being made at gatherings of the elite, and for such announcements to be made directly to the people in press conferences, taking questions frequently and directly from the press on every important matter. I withheld criticism of the chief advisor directly and leveled my ire at the press office, first for failing to provide the chief advisor with the required guidance and training for handling himself in interviews, such as the one he gave to the Voice of America. In so many ways, the chief advisor could have set standards through his own conduct this year. He could have laid down new norms so that deviations from such norms by the next elected Prime Minister would be both clearly visible and, moreover, could provide a basis for criticism by the public and the press. A fundamental new norm could have been a leader's practice of taking questions from the press. Instead, a risibly low standard was set by Professor Yunus, who gave only 2 or so interviews to Bangladeshi media in all his time, and never gave a proper press conference, one in which he took extensive questions from the press. This was the exact opposite of what we should expect of government. But the chief advisor has given interviews. I must acknowledge that. Travel, as the expression goes, broadens the mind. If so, Professor Yunus arguably has the broadest mind in Bangladesh. As he traveled the world, seemingly stopping off in Bangladesh from time to time, he courted foreign media, expecting and receiving lowball questions from interviewers for whom Bangladesh is a sideshow. Even then, however, when faced with the mildest challenge from Voice of America, the chief advisor buckled. Then, again, recently, he gave a disastrous interview to a typically well-prepared Mehdi Hasan, an interview that was excruciatingly painful to watch. That interview, by the way, caused scarcely a ripple in Bangladesh's enfeebled news media. You should watch it all in full on YouTube. When it first came out, only the first 5 minutes were available in front of the paywall. Now, the whole of it is available. Perhaps such a performance is what everyone had come to expect of him. Perhaps that's why the press didn't report it well. This is important because accountability is intimately linked to free expression. To understand this, let's turn to the West, where accountability has gone AWOL, disappeared in recent years. On July 7, 2020, Harper's Magazine published an open letter in defense of freedom of expression. Its 150 signatories formed a broad political spectrum and included the likes of Margaret Atwood, Noam Chomsky, Salman Rushdie, Steven Pinker, J.K. Rowling, and Gloria Steinem. Because I was approached, and because I was in broad agreement with the thrust of the letter, I found myself numbered among the signatories. The letter was, I think it is fair to say, directed at what was described in those days as cancel culture, a term and an idea that seems so quaint now, of course. But its principal target was a culture seen in college campuses, the media, and most predominantly on social media, that sought to punish the expression of views that were, by some measure, unpopular among the relevant arbiters of what should or should not be said. Most of them are, I think it's fair to say, would be regarded as on the left. Most of these people who sought to shut down speech on college campuses back then. Prominent figures had been prevented from speaking on college campuses, and others had been fired from positions in academia or liberal media organs. These were not instances of the government limiting freedom of expression, but they were, in my view and that of some other progressives like me, such as Noam Chomsky, limitations by unaccountable parties on the free expression of ideas. But such limitations have subsequently been eclipsed by what has been starkly obvious since October 7, 2023. People in media and in other quarters in the West have lost their jobs or have been sidelined, and students arrested or deported after expressing views sympathetic to Palestinians. We know this not from mainstream or legacy media, but from the new force on the political stage, the internet and social media. This abridgment of free expression has now been augmented by efforts from government institutions, but it began and continues with curtailment from outside the machinery of state, principally from corporations. Again, these are institutions that are not accountable to the public, which, as polling shows, now largely supports the Palestinian people. But they are accountable only to the parties that hold the purse strings. The reluctance of people to speak freely in Bangladesh, even with Hasina's departure, evidences the extent of the social constraints on our society. And this government has done little to weaken those constraints. In some respects, it has made things worse. When the signing of the July Charter was announced with much fanfare, an obligatory photograph of the signatories was published. What was striking about that photograph was that of the 47 or so people in the frame, only one was a woman. Just one. Earlier in the year, when Shireen Haq, the head of the Women's Commission, came under attack in public, did the chief advisor leap to a full-throated defense of the woman appointed by his own government? Not in the least. Instead, Professor Yunus stayed silent. And in fact, from the very beginning, the Consensus Commission did not even consider the recommendations of the Women's Commission. Did Ali Riaz even give a damn about the Women's Commission or its recommendations? Does he give a damn about women? They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. When I reflect on that picture of 47 signatories with just one woman, I think of 3 words: sexism and misogyny. By staying silent, the chief advisor encourages Bangladeshi society to remain silent. He and his administration have been complicit in continuing and cultivating the culture of silence. He did indeed lead by example. It just wasn't a very good example. Of course, there are political and other limitations on the press, limitations that come from beyond government. There is the prospect of violence. Scanning the front pages of newspapers every day yields this observation. a journalist by the curious name of staff correspondent seems to do an awful lot of work. The byline, ordinarily bearing a real name, is coveted by journalists. After all, a journalist's career advances as she makes a name for herself. So why would she give up the byline for this anonymous staff correspondent? Safety is, of course, the primary reason. On most days, half of the front page stories, especially those relating to the announcements of political leaders, are attributed to the staff correspondent. This is the climate in which the chief advisor declined to assume the moral high ground. A man who needn't fear a Molotov cocktail being thrown through the window of his home or office in the way that a journalist might. Making himself accountable would have sent a resounding signal to other leaders that facing difficult questions from the press is the right norm for the country. Yes, you may say, Professor Yunus should have defended Shireen Haq, but, you might add, he simply doesn't have the talent to take press conferences. And perhaps you are right. After all, so much of the past year has been a ceremony of the politically blind leading the politically talentless, culminating in the farce, the outright farce that has been the Consensus Commission. We might talk about freedom of expression as a necessary condition for literature or art, but it is accountability that delivers freedom. When those forces that would seek to limit such freedom are properly accountable, be they state or non-state actors, then freedom has the upper hand. Accountability is what a thriving literary culture has in common with a thriving political culture, both of which sit in a broader culture of accountability. Mediocrity thrives wherever accountability is absent. Accountability is not merely the means by which we punish political or economic failures. Accountability in the public space is also the very same mechanism by which we identify talent or the good or those values that we want to advance in our society. Equally, no literary culture can flourish without a flourishing and sophisticated culture of literary criticism. Already in the West, we see the decline of literary culture alongside the decline of literary criticism. All the newspapers in the US and UK have in the past 10 years culled, reduced their staffing of their literary sections, some even shutting them down altogether. And this at the same time as sales of literary fiction have been crashing. Long pieces of criticism have been replaced by bite-sized book reviews. This is not criticism. This is not accountability. I had occasion to consider this not so long ago. Here, as I draw myself towards a close, I will relate a story that contains a little self-promotion, for which I hope you will forgive me. Fredric Jameson is a name known to every self-respecting academic in literary studies. An academic and literary theorist and critic, a titan, he passed away last year. Shortly before he died, he penned a list of those who were, in his opinion, the greatest novelists of the 20th and 21st century. The list was published earlier this year and laid out on the screen in a way that clearly sought to reflect the layout of the paper on which Jameson had presumably written it. It was a rather short list given its scope. When I saw my name on the list, I was moved to tears. I was surprised too, of course. I'm hardly a novelist since I published only one novel. But Jameson headed off my thought that he might be mistaking me for someone else by writing the title of my one novel in brackets beside my name. Why should this move me as much as it did? After all, a decade has passed since the novel was published, and a novel earned accolades and praise back then. My life has moved on with other non-writing ventures, though lately I contracted to write 2 books, both works of non-fiction. I was moved because it mattered to me to hear this from someone whose judgment I so respected. Writers and artists almost universally respond to this very simple thing. It is the obverse side of accountability. The word criticism has negative connotations, the threat of a sting, perhaps even in the phrase literary criticism. But criticism, even with the suggestion of such sting, also carries the possibility of separating what is good from what is mediocre. Without political accountability, good governance doesn't stand a chance. Without literary criticism, literature will wither, and both emerge from a broader culture of accountability. Freedom to speak means freedom for others to criticize what you say. Unless both flourish, neither does. Thank you.
Now, we will have a conversation between our keynote speaker and the chair of today's seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to their dialogue on some of the key ideas raised in the speech.
Thank you so much. I think that was very bold as you were 10 years ago at Dhaka University with your land of dead ideas, with your observations on the limits of expression that we have even after a most wonderful uprising, a near revolution just about a year ago. So, yeah. When I saw the title of your speech, The Politics of Literature, it took me back to my graduate studies days, my postgraduate studies, when I was part of a group called Literature Teaching Politics, we used to call it LTP. And we actually studied literary critics. Edward Said was the reigning one in those days, and read our favorite novels and poets to see the kind of imperialism, the kind of Western hierarchical modes that were contained in them, and how we as readers, and even liking those things, were placed within it. So to me, the politics of literature has always been in the reading of literature, but you have expanded the horizon to talk about the general freedoms, political freedoms of expression, the freedom of the press, and how that impacts on the writing of literature. So I would really open this up for others to respond before we draw the conversation in its. There are lots of people from the press. Please give your introduction.
Dear author, I am Aditi Phanguni. I am also a small writer in my country, in my own language, and we must thank you, and we feel very much grateful to you because through your pen, the South Asian diaspora or the Bangladeshi diaspora has won such a critical acclaim overseas. But I couldn't really expect that you were so down to earth in your approach and in your behavior. In your novel, you have portrayed two South Asian characters, one Pakistani young man and another Bangladeshi young man, Jafar, who studies mathematics and then switches to law. Probably somehow he may be a reflection of your own because you were a student of maths and then studied law and you were an investment banker and worked in Afghanistan. So you have depicted the rise of far-right white supremacist forces in UK, who is the South Asian young man experience or witness. And now you are in Dhaka, and just within 1 year, you are feeling frustrated since after the July 2024, and you are very much worried about the condition of press freedom, about the condition of right to speech of people here. So obviously you are seeing all the graffitis on the wall, and within 1 year people are frustrated. আগেই তো ভালো ছিলাম, and we say it in whispers, otherwise people can, someone can brand us that fascistic dushan, amki fascistic dushan. I hope you understand a little Bangla. So are you planning to write any novel against this particular backdrop? Thank you.
I'll answer in English, if that's okay, yeah. I often am asked if I'll write a novel in about Bangladesh, with Bangladesh as the foreground. And my novel, that novel could never have emerged here. It's just impossible. There are two reasons. One is very prosaic. I come from a village. My father was a waiter, my mother was a seamstress. In Bangladesh we were quite poor, and in Britain very poor. So someone like me has no opportunity. I was gifted as a child, but there are many gifted children born in Bangladesh every day who don't get any opportunities. And I was lucky because when I was small, we moved to Britain where there were libraries. Sorry, that's one reason. The second, perhaps more relevant reason, is that a novel like mine criticizes power where it sees it. And that's just very difficult to do in this country. Especially in the way that I did it, which was unflinching. I mean, I didn't pull any punches. In fact, I did it so much that it was apparent that certain people in the UK, especially the UK, didn't like it, didn't want to platform me because of that. But that was, but it didn't mean that the book didn't get some kind of reception. Here, a novel like that, it's samizdat. It's what the Russians would, at the time of Stalin, they would secretly pass these things around each other. That's what it is. It's if you change the story and mapped it onto here in some way, because here you can't stand up. It's not only that I can't speak about these things here, but also that nobody will talk about it. So there's no way such a book could circulate other than in the underground. It's impossible to have a thriving literary culture without these sorts of things being freely discussed, It's a work of art that we should all look at and be able to talk about. Instead, everything is, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's almost not an exaggeration. So much of what we say is understood as an expression of a political allegiance or as a challenge to somebody else's political position. you know, and by political I mean some party or other interest group. And so ideas don't get assessed on their own merits. Excuse me.
There are many writers and literary critics and readers in the audience. So what I'm hearing from you is somehow very disturbing and very negative, that we cannot have ideas, we cannot have creativity, we cannot have all of these things because there is an unsaid, unspoken censorship all over. I would like to invite the audience to talk about it, but I also would, there's an interview I once heard on the Western media, the BBC, while I was in a hotel room and had to pass my time.
That's your excuse.
And that's my excuse. And that was with the Iranian filmmaker Gurustami. And he was being asked, how does he make films under such rigid censorship laws? And he said, you don't recognize the censorship laws you're working under, and that is the censorship of the market. You have to have Tom Cruise, let us say, as a hero for your film to be seen.
Absolutely.
But I don't have anything of that. So I can use my art to speak around the topics, and hence good art is made. So I think censorship and how one, I don't mean censorship in the way as you don't mean state censorship.
Nor do I.
But all these other things that we are a very repressed people, I think 10 times before I express any views, but I know many people who don't. But it's not that views don't get expressed and don't get debated. So Shwaka
Before you absolutely, I want to keep going, but I want to talk very quickly about the availability bias. How many of you have heard of the availability bias? It crops up everywhere. So the availability bias is, I was talking about this recently somewhere else. There is a myth around the world that dolphins are benign, that dolphins are kind, that dolphins are loving. I say it's a myth. What I mean by myth is not that it's untrue or true, but that it is an common idea. You'll see it in fishing villages all over the world. There are so many stories of dolphins nudging sailors who've fallen overboard, nudging them, pushing them back to the shore. Right? These lovely dolphins playing around in the sea, and they push the fisherman who's fallen overboard, and push him back to the shore. So we developed this idea of what dolphins are like, based on these sailors who've been nudged to the shore. What if I told you that dolphins don't have any idea which direction they're nudging people? They don't care, they're just playing. They are sending some fishermen out to die. We just don't hear about them. We only hear about the dolphins that nudged people back to shore. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is called the availability bias. It appears everywhere in all data. And why is data relevant here? Data is relevant because if you want to understand what kind of limitations there are on freedom of expression here, what kind of censorship in this broad sense, which is the right sense, in my view, the better sense in which to understand censorship, that is both state and non-state, both political and social. If you want to understand that, you have to start thinking about what's missing, not just what you see. And that's much harder to do. Some bright spark thought, hang on a moment, maybe the dolphins are nudging people out, further out to sea. You have to start thinking about what sort of writing is missing. the lady over there asked about my novel and whether I would write another novel based in Bangladesh. Well, this novel would not have been possible in some transmuted form set in Bangladesh. So this novel, in a way, gives you a clue about what's missing. There are lots of other clues. You can imagine novels. If I wrote a parody today about a Nobel laureate. There you go, see? Everybody's already, right? Some people might be uncomfortable. But do you see, the very fact, when I mentioned Ali Riaz's name, I think he was first. How many of you did that? Right? Hang on, we can't hear you. Yeah. I'm not criticizing. I'm in criticism, Gorchina. I'm making an empirical observation that really we should be at the place where we can talk about these things quite freely. Obviously, there is always drama in a public context, but it should not cause anybody anxiety to hear someone say Ali Riaz is incompetent, demonstrably incompetent. আপনার বাংলায় আপনার প্রশ্ন জিজ্ঞেস করবেন একটু না we will come back আমরা বিরত আসবো oh yeah sorry we don't want to say nobody's excluded. We're connected on Facebook, that's all. We're not some cabal.
First, I have a small question about punches. You said you don't pull your punches.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you
No,
said
I think
that.
he said that.
No, you said that.
What, here, today?
Today.
Did I say that? Okay.
Now, let me give back what you said.
All right.
You don't pull your punches in your novel. That's what you said.
Right. Right. In a novel. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
I thought you meant me as a person. In a novel, no, because in a novel I'm pretending. I'm like an actor. I'm writing other characters.
Okay, but now I have a follow-up question to that about real punches, that whether you pull them or not. I am actually rereading your book. I seldom reread novels.
Yeah.
But I am rereading in the light of what
You know, I get messages once a week from someone who's rereading.
But
the
I
novel.
started rereading it because of this event
Right.
this afternoon.
Right.
I bought the book in August 2014.
Okay.
And the last time I heard you was when you were having a conversation with those in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just started. I had forgotten most of what you have, when I read it the first time.
Right.
And I am on page 80 right now.
Okay.
Okay.
The next one is 81.
Thank you. Because I don't, I'm not very good in counting. No, now there is a scene where Zafar and the Pakistani narrator, they are walking somewhere in New York.
Yeah.
No, in London. And they are accosted by a couple of skinheads.
Yeah.
And Zafar goes for his throat. The line is, I punched him on the throat.
That's right. Yeah.
My question is, did you ever punch a skinhead?
So here's the funny thing, right? I grew up on a council estate. I went to a state school. I grew up in a neighborhood that was quite rough. You had to defend yourself.
So you have done it. I thought that you wouldn't really give me a direct answer.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank you.
I cannot condone violence. No, condone violence.
Now, just a small observation. Now, if you had given a similar lecture before July 2024,
Yeah.
I am not very sure whether you would have been allowed to finish
Yes.
the entire lecture.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't have.
You have been very bold today, but you have finished.
Yeah.
We are all
Yeah.
sitting and questioning.
Yeah.
So there is a difference.
Oh, There absolutely is. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there is a difference. Absolutely. It was a hard-won difference. And no, I would say that, we should never settle for the fact that there has been an improvement. That's the hallmark of mediocrity. We should, that's settling. So you don't rest on your laurels. You want this country to be better. I want Bangladesh to be even better. We all want Bangladesh to be even better. And acknowledging that we made an advance is great. It's important to do that. It's actually important to do that because it reminds us that we have power. This Mamdani win in New York tells everybody in New York and elsewhere that young people, just like the Long July, that young people, 34-year-old Mamdani, and good people and the people can make a difference, that they can take back control from corporations and from those who would deny them control and power. That is rightfully theirs. So it is good, because that's the motivation. But it is only motivation, really, because the past is the past.
My name is Mohin Mijan. I'm from BIDS, Planning Ministry. So it was thank you so much for the amazing speech. We are somewhat overwhelmed that you are reading a script, but you are so much connected with the audience that we didn't feel that you were reading something.
Oh, good.
So,
I'll let you finish. And when I gave that talk at Dhaka University, which you can see, plug it again, you can see it on my Facebook page, I actually only had one sheet of paper with bullet points. And usually I prefer to speak that way, and I wasn't sure this was the right thing to do because I'm much more interactive and fluid, but I'm glad you told me that. Thank you very much. Because
I have no question actually. I would like to comment on some of your speech.
Yeah.
At first, the title, The Politics of Literature.
Yeah.
So, a bit critical. So I don't think we have properly justified the we justified on the title, The Politics of Literature.
Yeah.
Most of your speech was on the criticism of the interim government and the other things you added. And it was really wonderful. The content is, we are enlightened, so much enlightened.
Okay.
So the main point is, I think you could be somewhat kind to the interim government, but you didn't.
They're grown-ups, I think.
You're right, and you criticized in 2014 on that regime, and Naomi regime. And they said, I think the culture of politics or the history develops spirally. We cannot expect that it will develop overnight. So you said you cannot we cannot say Ali Diaz is a disaster, or we cannot directly criticize the chief advisor. But as a government employee, I did so. I criticized almost all the advisors running the government, and I coined a sentence in my mind when you were talking that the advisors, the government cannot run the government well because they are from non-government organization. So.
So the question is.
The question is, not the question. My comment is, we
don't have to.
We developed somewhat, and
Yeah.
we are going spirally, and we can criticize the government more than the last regime,
Yes.
but not as the way you are thinking. But your criticism is correct and right. We should say it like this.
You see,
but you should be somewhat kind to the government.
Can I just make the observation that you are making criticism, but at the same time defending me. And no, that's great.
Yes, I'm defending you. I'm defending you because I love your criticism.
And what, it's really interesting. And to me, what it says, let me tell you what it tells me. I might be wrong about this. What it tells me is that you're not familiar with the idea of making a criticism. I'm not saying anything wrong, but you're just not familiar with the possibility of someone standing up and just making criticisms. And that's okay. That's okay. I understand that the picture is complicated. I understand that the picture contains elements that I'm not aware of, just as is true for all of us. We are all half blind, always. But we should come, I would like for us to come to a position where we don't feel that hearing criticism. Okay, I'm going to say something here that I'm going to find a diplomatic way to say it, but maybe there isn't one, or maybe I'm not capable of finding a diplomatic way of saying this. Sometimes when I make a criticism, I have the impression that people are affronted because it feels, maybe I'm wrong, it feels like I'm attacking Bangladesh, that I'm attacking the dignity of Bangladesh, but I'm not. And I think that ever since the founding, it's actually not uncommon in young nations, nations which have emerged from war quite recently in a historical time. It's not uncommon for the nation to feel that it has to protect itself from outsiders, and that criticism of its parts is a criticism of the whole, especially when it comes from someone like me who occupies this odd status of almost outsider, right? Or almost insider, but not either. Yeah.
A dilemma,
Yeah.
another sphere altogether.
Yeah.
Answering your
Yeah,
thing
please.
about we feel so constrained to defend ourselves
Yeah.
because of the fragile situation in which we are. And I'm speaking as a feminist here, and I think women face this a lot, because a lot of the time, I'm remembering the Taslima Nasreen case, that you couldn't travel, step outside the boundaries of this country, but you were told that women are so horribly off in Bangladesh, they're being attacked, they're being imprisoned and all of that. And all of it, then you found yourself in this strange position where you had to say, no, this is not true. But at the same time, we know that women are oppressed, women are not free to be themselves, women have to face a lot of hurdles. So how do you do this as you present an image which has been used, we know historically, women, we have been shown as lesser civilizations because we mistreat our women. And so we don't want to fall into that representation. And at the same time, we are fighting for life
Exactly.
equality. It's a horrible thing that we are placed in. And I think that is true for the country as a whole.
There's a parallel also with India attacked Bangladesh for its treatment of minorities. With extraordinarily absurd claims. And so we are on a defensive footing. This is nonsense. But the truth is that yes, there is some. Nothing like what India says. There is some, and we should be talking about that. But because our conversations are in the shadow of this nonsense, we limit ourselves, right? And if I say, there are issues to do with the rights of minorities in Bangladesh, then immediately the reaction is, so many people take that as an alignment with India's claims. So it makes the conversation that we actually need to have, it makes that very difficult. This is, I should let others speak. But this is about confidence. This requires leadership. This requires people, charismatic people, mandanis, who can lead with confidence. I'm not joking. I mean, I believe this, but I might be wrong. You can shout.
Hello, yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you and meet you with you afterwards. Your book has been called a book of ideas by many critics, like the ones you spoke in today's speech, and hundreds of reviews on Goodreads and Kirkus. And I was wondering if there's a certain, there's a certain fascination with these novels that are also a book of ideas. You've got your Gravity's Rainbows, you've got your Infinite Jest, books like that. I was wondering if there's a novel that is also a book of ideas that is dear to you.
By someone else?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure, I ever understood what that meant. I really love, the epigraph to the entire novel, my novel, is from a book called Austerlitz by W.G. Sebald. And I don't know how popular it is. He is some would call him a writer's writer. I mean, he is very popular among writers. And when I read Austerlitz, I had an experience that I never had before when reading fiction. So I'm not answering your question because it's not really and that was, I was mesmerized. Now, this word mesmerized often is used casually just to mean that I was interested. What I mean is, I finished the book and I was in a state of consciousness that was halfway between sleep and wake. I mean, literally. So, I would expect that to happen if I took a tablet or something, right? I never imagined that reading a book could rewire my brain in some way, temporarily in the past, after a few days. But I was in this hallucinatory, not hallucinatory, because I didn't see images. I was mesmerized, hypnotized. So form. So writers love books like that, like this, because it actually is to do with the form of the book. The book is one paragraph, and that sounds like a gimmick. It's not at all a gimmick. It was necessary because he had to, it was the way he got you into this rhythmic reading and then eventually put you in a trance. One paragraph, long book. I mean, it's not a long book, but it's a long paragraph. And no speech marks, no quotation marks. Austerlitz, Austerlitz. W.G. Sebald. Sebald is spelled S-E-A-L-T.
Very nice meeting with you. And I'm Reza Roman, mostly working as a rights activist. To be honest, few things. I think there is a mesmerizing or hypnotizing situation here, in my understanding, that there was not necessarily enough criticism to this current IG. I think there is probably not enough to topple them out, but obviously there are a number of dynamics that are going on. It's not very settled that they are.
Hang on, I'm going to stop you there.
Sure.
I'm not saying that they should be toppled. I'm not even saying that criticism's objective is not to topple. The criticism's first objective is to make better.
You meant critique, in fact, in a more appropriate word rather than
it sounds like that's your reading of what I'm saying.
Yeah, so what I'm saying, like, this is also, it's not even the situation earlier, and we were not really to be hypnotized when this, it's a certain extent military-backed interim government now we are running, because there is a very, obviously the intervention from the military not very much visible, but at the same time not much invisible at all. And it's somewhere in between, and at the same time, people who have had experiences of 2007 and 8, those same group of people who struggled, and probably they are now in power. And we literally realize what is probably going to be happen in coming months and years, because if we argue that Sheikh Hasina's regime was an authoritarian regime, and obviously the plantation of the authoritarian regime started, and now fascism or authoritarianism is almost 18 years old young boy. So that's not immediately or very because of this uprising, we actually think that this is absolutely gone. I think the idea and thought of fascism or authoritarian regime is still functioning, and that's why the continuation of human rights violation like extrajudicial killing and forceps is not reported at all, but that's also happening more than 24 hours if someone is detained. That's enough. Even a woman was detained, not even arrested, but staying at a safe house for 4.5 months inside the police station, who actually just arrived from India to Bangladesh. That's kind of situation is happening. So, and also what I am actually suggesting in the presence of state of exception, actually absence of political literature is missing. I mean, absolutely, politics of literature is absent and is missing, and that's need to be recultivated and also somehow reorganized to actually have a formation of the state, in my understanding, which has a serious lack and subjugation of women, day-to-day life of their life, from media house to PCB. Women speaker is so huge, so bad situation. So, and lastly, the repressive situation not necessarily always lead to us a better life, but also creative, because Digital Security Act and other repressive act or exercise of those acts against us not necessarily dominate us, rather we somehow innovative and more creative also. Probably in our discussion we need to also consider a little bit from that perspective as well.
Yes.
Thank you for your session. I'm Shams Sarifin, working as a research manager of Bangladesh Poetry Institute and the Ministry of Commerce. Your keynote speaker is about the politics of literature. So my question is how the literature should be formed in terms of addressing the challenges of fascism or post-authoritarian region, so that we can challenge at the first time with our strong narrative. Because without narrative we cannot challenge fascism or an authoritarian region. So what actually the basic responsibility of a poet, of a writer, of a thinker to challenge the power structure, and how can we address this issue whenever people or people of Bangladesh face such type of coercion measure from a government or any other organization. Then my second question is, you have said about politics of literature, but politics of literature is established on the base of political economy. And you know that we are LDC country, and it is not possible for a country like Bangladesh to avoid the political and economic reason. So without being politically and economically independent, how is it possible for us to create such types of narrative which become the effective politics of literature? And my third question is, there is a lack of translation about Bengali literature because we have seen the great literary thought of our poet or writer like Jashimuddin Al-Mahmud and many more. So is there any way for English literature, any writer like you to translate our classical poet or classical novel so that our literature can reach around the world. That's all.
I'll answer the third question and then the first question. And if we have time, I'll get to the second question. The third question, no, I can't do it. Well, also, the answer... Yeah, exactly. Bangladesh is got to do it. Not just Bangla Academy, because Bangla Academy is Bangla. You need more people. I mean, this is a heresy here, or blasphemy rather, for me to say this at Bangla Academy. But more Bangladeshis need to be able to read and write in English. I don't know how good my novel, how well my novel was translated into Bangla. It's available in Bangla. I'm told by some that it's not a very good translation. This is actually a common problem. I wanted to find people to translate things from, because I wanted to publish in Bangla here in Pratama and elsewhere. Pratama very generously, I mean, they invited me in one day and said, please write for us and we will translate whatever you write straight away. I'm thinking of, I spoke to Modiur Rahman, exchanged messages a couple of days ago and asked him, I might have something for you. And he said, please send, but I'm not sure he'll want to publish this if I send it to him. So the answer to that third question is obvious, at least to me, and I think to others. More Bangladeshi people will have to speak, or Bengalis have to speak and write, just at least write in English and be able to translate. The first question is an interesting one. It's really the question, what are the responsibilities of an artist? And I used to think that the artist has no responsibility. You laugh at that, but this is actually, it's a question of freedom. Artists have no obligations in a sense. You are just creating art. I changed my mind about that. And my view is that when a society is in an authoritarian state or a dictatorial state of being, I think the artist then has the responsibility that everyone has. So it's not a unique responsibility of the artist, but it is the responsibility that everyone has and that the artist might discharge through art. That is the responsibility to tell the truth, to speak truth to power, right? But when a society isn't like that, when there is a, then I think that's the society in which people, while being vigilant, they can enjoy that freedom and not feel that they have an obligation and that they can create in this freedom. So does that make any sense? You don't have to agree, but I'm asking if it makes sense. Yeah, would you? Translation, someone will translate it into Bangla. Yeah, we can disagree about that, or and we can talk about that as well. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, the thing is, you see, even I'm not saying that if you have an environment in which artists don't feel a responsibility, I'm not saying that there will be no challenging of power. There will be artists who want to do that as well, right? But it's one of the luxury. It's a luxury of freedom, of a free society, that not everybody feels an obligation to do that.
At the same time, the artist does not have the luxury to just be. He or she needs an audience.
Exactly.
He needs a readership. So talking to people, because talking to people is what literature does.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you can't talk to people, you're just spinning dreams out of
in your own head. Exactly.
It's not going to get you a reader.
Exactly. Exactly.
So there is no Akla Tolobey. You have to create a community of readers, if nothing else. And that means speaking to people who are hearing your words.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Good evening. First of all, I congratulate you for such an outstanding, wonderful lecture you have delivered. So, and I have some questions regarding your lecture.
I agree with you, by the way.
Thank you. Okay. So one thing is, in YouTube, I heard a podcast that is 2 or 3 years back in United Kingdom, not in Iran, not North Korea, not in Syria, but in United Kingdom. In
The largest number of people incarcerated for, yeah.
So, I mean, some people were arrested for posting something very objectionable in social media, particularly Instagram or it might be Facebook, and nearly about 250 people got arrested in UK. So now, West is saying that you should do this and you should do that, but they're doing the same thing in their own country. Why is that? And why is such a double standard? And so I have something else. So one thing is, you see, Hasina was a dictator, but nowadays, those who came in power, they themselves are acting like pirates, and I'm sorry to say that. And one thing is, why doesn't power-hungry people, and those who come in power, can't have such a thing called tolerance? So if anyone's saying against me, I should be saying that, yes, this person is a national threat, persecute him or eliminate him. But yesterday we had Ainaghar or some other things, and now we have mob. So how can we get rid of that? And beyond everything, what would be the role of the literary people like you and others, like our ma'am? What would be the role of the people involved in literature and art to maintain the absolute expression of freedom? Thank you, sir.
So the double standards question is a great question. So yeah, absolutely, the West is hypocritical. But you know what? I think the West will do a lot less preaching anyway. Gaza especially has, just blown all of that to smithereens. I know, probably not a metaphor I want to use, but it's just, it has removed all credibility. They cannot point the finger. They're manifestly hypocrites. You mentioned people arrested for posting on social media. Well, people are arrested for, there is a prohibited group, and even as I speak on this point, I'm hesitating because if I were to say I support this group, certainly in England, if I did that in Britain, I would be arrested. I would be liable to be arrested. So there's a particular group that was involved in non-violent protest. Yeah, I mean the worst thing they did was they broke into an air base and they poured paint on military equipment. That's all. But this group was then outlawed. It was classified as a terrorist organization in the same way that you would imagine a terrorist organization. But subsequently, there have been protests every weekend in the UK, sometimes, always vast numbers, and the protesters have been vicars and elderly retired accountants and school teachers. I mean, and people in wheelchairs. It's been very carefully done. Oh, and almost all of them white. And these people have been protesting. They're the people that you would find in an English village. They wouldn't harm a flea. And yet they're being arrested. And they're being taken into the vans. And of course, cameras are on standby, and as they are arrested and taken away, they have their own speeches rehearsed. And as I say, the optics of this is astonishing. Because these aren't brown people like me. You know, if I did that, then this would be turned into a story of how, you know, Muslims are taking over the country and these terrorists are all over here. But these are people, these are white, elderly people who you just, are you going to call these people terrorists now as well? So, I think the West is going, not forever, but for a long time to come, is going to have a very difficult time pointing the finger. This is not necessarily entirely a good thing. Because it has been able to point the finger in circumstances in which the finger should be pointed. But even then, there has always been hypocrisy. But I think that this problem that you perceive, I think this will attenuate. The role of intellectuals. Intellectuals are, you know, they were very much a part of this uprising. Students. And before that there were, thank you. Oh, it's thank you. Students, and before that there were reading groups. And there were, you know, there was a culture of intellectual inquiry and trying to find the movements where people were trying to create a new movement rooted in literature and ideas. So I didn't think I need to come in here from Britain, even though I feel myself Bangladeshi. I'm a Sylheti boy. I'm a Sylheti boy. Even though I once described me as a son of the soil. But I was born here. But I don't need to come here and make any suggestion about how intellectuals can make a contribution. This is Bangladesh, this is Bengal, we are Bengalis, right? And you know, we are literary people. We are intellectuals.
And the group, we all know which group it is.
What's that?
We all know which group it is. Palestine Action. I can mention it without getting arrested.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, and it has made British people and Europeans and Americans, all of, you know, the majority of Brits and Americans now support Palestine. And yet you have you know, only 8% of Democrat voters in the US support Israel. That's 8%. And yet the entire Democratic Party, the senators and congressmen, with a few exceptions, a handful of exceptions, all still, you know, and genocide. You know, America still sends enormous amounts of aid, military and otherwise, to Israel. So they have understood that their politics is messed up. Their leaders do not represent the people. That's why Mamdani's win was astonishing. Because, you know, sorry, we could talk about that. I mean, one of the most amazing things he did was he went to talk to Trump voters. And when he talked to Trump voters, he found that they were concerned about the same things. You know, many of them were concerned about the affordability, economic needs.
My name is Samina Ahmed, and I was the chair when you came, and I just want to talk about a ripple effect. That day after your speech, you left, I think within an hour, and then I was called by the Vice Chancellor to his room.
Wow.
As I was the chair, you know, representing the department, and I was asked that, who came to your department? Who was it who was talking? So I told your name, and I said, he's a novelist. And Arifin Siddiqui. And he said that, I said, he's a novelist. He said, then why did he give a political speech? So I said, when did he give a political speech? Because I didn't hear anything about a political speech. So he said, no, in that auditorium, Muzaffarabad, he said very bad things. Why did he say this? So I was sitting and thinking that what bad things you have said. So I tried to remember and I said, no sir, who told you? I just asked him, who told you? So he said, no, I've got the news. I said, no, he didn't say anything bad. He was just talking about Bangladesh. And he just made a few remarks and then he was actually not talking about Bangladesh. He veered off. He went off to some other points. So I just wanted to tell you that because I felt bad when you were talking about that people were writing and no one was supporting you. So I thought I'd say that.
No, of course.
But then I have the question that you did say that Bangladesh is a land of dead people. So do you still believe that? Or do you think things have changed?
I said a land of dead ideas. And what I mean by that is that really for ideas to develop, they have to be ventilated. They have to find the person who can take that idea and do something with it, or who can critique it and improve it so that my idea improves. Conversation. A culture, a literary culture is a culture of conversation. A political culture, a healthy political culture is a culture of conversation.
I just want to go back a year to July 24, and my friend Harun Wasif is sitting here. So what was very exciting to me about the uprising is that it seemed to be based on ideas by these young men, then unfortunately or fortunately joined the government. I was very excited when they joined the government as well, as well by Mamdani becoming the mayor. But people who were reading Talal Asad and Dinesh Chakraborty, and I thought, oh my God, the things we can't do in class. They have been reading those things, and they have, in their ways, tried to get these ideas into action, into the way of imagining a country. But as soon as we try to formalize these into statecraft, into political parties, somehow that conversation seems to have fizzled away and not been there. And I'm looking at one person because we shared that excitement of the ideas behind the uprising, not just brave young men, amader damad chelera, but it's not just that, but the ideas that were behind that uprising were just amazing. And I would like you to say something.
No. Oh, so you, yeah. No, I would like to hear from you too. I didn't know who you were referring to.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to hear you. About the idea, about the dead idea, a land of dead idea. What my teacher and my friend Ferdinand say that without an idea, the revolution cannot be happen, and it rises from little study circles. And they put many ideas. Now they are being defeated by the old ideas, the nationalist ideas, the Islamist ideas, the statist ideas. So the vibrant society which gave rise to these young boys and girls, they are now in a puzzle. And this is like a quicksand. When you see people rises and the sand pulls them back. But at the same time, you know that the great Bengali Renaissance, the Kolkata Renaissance, there was ideas and there was great man and woman, or only man, though, except the Begum Rohia. But in Bangladesh, we do not see any great man in our 60s, the comparison to Ram Mohan, Vidyasagar, Bankim, etc., etc. So we do not have superhero, super intellectuals, super philosophers, super novelists like Rabindranath. But we did have a language movement. We have the uprising of '69, and we organized the liberation war. These very people. So how can they how could they facilitate these movements, give rise to these ideas without being creative about their history, their land, and their country?
Yeah, I hear that, but I think I can agree with you, and actually I think you will agree with me. We're talking at cross purposes. We're talking at cross purposes. What I mean is, you might think that we're in disagreement, but we're not. In fact, you proved my point. So there were these study groups, and ideas were possible, circulation of ideas. But it fails when you widen the circle. In order to have a culture of ideas, in order to have a literary culture and a particular political culture, you have to be able to widen the conversation. Of course, even now, not now, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 11 years ago when I was here, there were people having really interesting conversations, full of ideas, but they were small circles. Those circles have to join together and grow. And of course, power will not allow that. You seem to be surprised that, you know, the ambitions and the intellectualism of the Long July hasn't survived with the ascent to power. It doesn't surprise me at all, because what happens is that at a certain point, interest groups, and you don't even have to be a socialist or a Marxist, or you don't even have to invoke any labels to see that power doesn't want that. Corporate power. Bangladesh is an oligarchy. There are huge corporations that, why aren't we talking about this? Because it's dangerous. They're powerful. So yes, of course the country has the capacity to generate ideas, and of course there are these conversations, but these circles need to widen, and they need to join together to form a social culture.
People who were writers and thinkers in the 60s.
Mr. Haider, my first point is something with which you immediately agree, is that I found your talk interesting and engaging. But then I was questioning myself why I did that.
Have we met?
We have met, yeah. Okay. That's another history. Part of me was asking whether we should at all have any great deal of accountability expectation from the present dispensation. And the other thing is that he could have worded my thoughts a whole lot better than I am being able to talk about, indicated a little. Is that much of what you have said? On the other hand, many around us who want to return to the obscene ancient regime are also making this point with that viewpoint. So A, I do not have much expectation. They have not been elected to the level. B, somebody at my age, if I look back, I clearly see that there would have been a period of anarchy at the present rulers probably. But that is not denying many of the important points that you have mentioned. I just thought that needs to be flagged. You just immediately said there will be circle. The circle must grow in a way not to indicate a negation of what has happened as a result of the Long July, but even better affirmative actions in every sense. On the other hand, it's I would be less than sincere if I didn't say that I enjoyed every word of it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I didn't interview that much, but the little bit I watched, we can sort of like...
The little bit that you watched.
Yeah, again and again. The little bit I watched again and again.
Times. That's amazing.
So
next time you want to watch a 35-minute interview.
Well, I did say that deliberately.
The best thing you can do is just watch 5 minutes, but watch it 7 times. Sorry.
That was... that was an interesting humor, you know, that, of course. Now, coming to...
I'm sorry. I mean, how can you really didn't mean to say what you just did you?
I did so, yeah.
You said, did I understand? I'm sure I misunderstood.
Let's go ahead.
Did I misunderstand that?
No, you understood clearly well.
You said that on the basis of 5 minutes of the 35-minute, whatever it was, interview, he did really well.
Yes, because that was the crux of the interview.
No, how do you know that?
In the way I thought about it.
How do you know that? You didn't see, I mean, did you hear anything I said about the availability bias?
Of course. That is something that influenced me, I confess.
All right. What is your point? I'm sorry.
Coming to something serious.
I think all of that was very serious.
Really?
Well, if you say that on the basis of 5 minutes, that you can form a view about the whole interview, then of course that's very serious. I mean, you have an extraordinary talent.
Thank you.
You need to market that talent. It will save other people time.
That's what I'm trying to do.
None of us need to watch TV or interviews because you can watch only 5 minutes and make a judgment about the whole thing. So why don't you bottle that? And you can sell that. It's an extraordinary talent. I've never been able to do that. I read
in these days of reels, that's what everyone is doing. They watch a part of something and form an opinion.
Well, coming to the thing I wanted to ask. So you said that you wrote for Prothomalo, Daily Star, and other newspapers.
I didn't say that.
You said you wrote columns, right? You wrote an open opinion piece.
I wrote an op-ed for
Daily Star. You did.
Yeah, you just said Prothomalo. So if I write for one paper, does that mean I write for all of them? In the same way that if you watch 5 minutes of a video, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really can't take that
from
serious.
his op-eds, what did you get?
Yeah, what did you get?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether Mr. Zia Rahman Haider was paid for his opinion ed that he wrote. Because in Bangladesh, what happens when you send opinion pieces...
I've never been paid for any writing, and you know what? I've been offered money, but it just doesn't. I can't take the money out of here. It doesn't.
In Bangladesh, people don't get paid. That's the point I want you to make. People don't get paid that much.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why it is very difficult to survive for writers over here. So this is one of the points I wanted to make.
Okay, so it's very difficult to make a living out of writing. Most writers have a day job.
Can I just say that literary fiction doesn't pay at all? I would have made more money if instead of writing this book, I had spent the same amount of time teaching primary school in the UK. This is one of the reasons. Yeah, we can. That would be a very interesting conversation about how class inflected the literary scene is. It's one of the reasons I don't really want to publish another novel, because I enter a field that is dominated by a class that I don't particularly like. So I'm a fellow at Dartmouth College in the US. There are several fellows, and another fellow is a chap called Edouard Louis, who is a novelist, a French novelist, and he's from a similar background to mine, very working class. He wrote a bestseller in France and around the world, and the Dartmouth College arranged for us to have a conversation. They expected us to talk for an hour. This was during COVID, it was online, they recorded it. It lasted 5 hours. And there was a point in the conversation when I said to Edouard, I said, listen, how do you feel about writing for these people? And he knew exactly what I meant. Because we come from very working class backgrounds. And then we meet people in the West who are not from our backgrounds at all. They don't really get it. And we don't really connect with them. I think I might have told you this, I don't know. Yeah, no, I know all about and it's true in the West as well. In the West, literature doesn't pay. It's in decline partly because of that.
But it's good to hear this from you, because I think Shaukat Bhai will bear me out, and Pamina, that we've grown up on English literature, and we have this impression of working class people making it through the pages of literature. When I was a child, I thought I could never become a writer because I wasn't an orphan and I wasn't poor or something. There was no way. What would I write about? Anyway, yes. And we must start winding up this conversation because we are beyond time.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Zulfikar. I am interested to know about actually national integration project of literature. That is, there is political process for improving the national integration. There is some legal aspect. So my question is to you: what is your reflection about literary path of national integration, and is there any global integration?
You mean nation making?
Yes, yes, yes.
So none of this needs prescription, not least, certainly not from me. I can't, I'm not going to make any kind of recommendation, other than this freedom point, this accountability point. I mean, without that, see, once you have that, or as that develops, people will have ideas. The answers will come from everyone. You don't need to look for prescriptions of content. I think we all are better served by thinking about the conditions in which we can all come up with the ideas. Do you see that it's a big difference? How do we achieve those conditions? How do we create the conditions in which those literary conversations can take place, those circles can widen, they can meet other circles, and then you, me, we all together or separately have ideas and we can exchange them, and then there can be an answer to the question, and not just one answer, but several answers to the question, what is the literature of integration? Maybe not that question, maybe another question that answers that question as well, you know? Yeah.
So let's have the last question, and I'd like to come back full circle.
Can I just say, I'm very sorry. I have a bad tendency. I want to apologize to you. Yeah, to you. I'm sorry.
I've got to sign your book.
Right. I'm sorry. I just want to say that.
There are too many questions. I don't know what to do. Thank you. Or did you keep it small?
Madam, should I add? Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I enjoyed the debate between our dear author, Jiyahader Rahman, and our very beloved Firdaus Ali Madam. Madam mentioned that literature can emerge from within suppression, from within repression. For example, we see lots of Afghan young women poets who are coming up, who are emerging, and they are giving voice to their suppression, the centuries-old tyranny of patriarchy they go through. So, otherwise, Palestinian poems could never be written. So, and if we come to the basic topic of today's session, the politics of literature, we see that this year's Nobel winner, Laszlo Krasznahorkai, in his, probably I have misarticulated his name, in his novel, we see that in the Registers of Melancholy, that a circus party comes to a Mofussil town or a village of his country, and then the circus party goes from one town to another town with the skeleton of a large whale. And actually he indicated at the oncoming collapse of Soviet Union and the oncoming collapse of socialism. So that's the authors, they predict the future. For example, you forecasted that Bangladesh is a country of dead ideas. I speak a very Bangla English. So actually, authors foresee the future, and we must respect your courage that the way you spoke about the loopholes of the existing system, the IG government, during the past government, I could at least share my political posts with public setting in Facebook. Now I post everything in customized setting, but this is not a criticism. That government had also definitely some constraints or some problems, and people never actually get their ultimate salvation. So that's my observation, and every revolution is followed by a counter-revolution. After the French Revolution, the counter-revolution came. After the Bolshevik Revolution, the Tsarist admirers again came into the scene. So we don't know what is going to happen, but yes, the participation of women in every public sphere is facing some decline, and so the inclusion of other socio-economic status and other minority groups. So we don't know that if Shah's Iran or Communist Iran was better.
Thank you, because I think we have some questions from the younger people. Come on. But
hello, Mr. Rama. Thank you. It's been long. I have been part of such diagnostic space where we can actually share our agreement and disagreement. My question is kind of like off topic, what we are discussing right now. But I would like to know your ideas about how we can actually dismantle those oppressions or domination over our freedom of expression. And what ma'am says, like how those ideas can bring into classroom discourses. Thank you.
I think a prescription to their japna. We have to find our own ways of expression.
Yeah, I'm proud to announce the launch of a new political party. No prescriptions. But you know, we did it once, right? And we just have to be brave, and that's really hard. But some people are, and we have to pray for them.
Last comment.
First of all, I'm so sorry about speaking Bangla right now. আমি আসলে প্রশ্ন করতে যাচ্ছি আজম স্যারকে, উনি আমার ডেপুটির একজন স্যার আর কি। তো কথা হচ্ছে যে আপনার বিহাইন্ড মানে আপনার যে পিছনের যে পোস্টারটা আছে, তো পোস্টার এখানে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে জিয়া হায়দার রহমান যে শার্টটা পরে আছে আপনার শার্টের সাথে মিলে গেছে। এটা কি কোইন্সিডেন্স নাকি আপনি গিফট দিয়েছেন আপনাকে? এটাও কি পলিটিক্স? সাহিত্যিক মানুষের কাছে তো এটা একটা পলিটিক্স আছে।
I had the privilege to pick my shirt, photograph. So it might happen.
I want to add, that's hilarious. But I do want, this last question, I just want to add for that. You know, we're at Bangla Academy. There are universities around here. The best thing that you can do is keep learning, keep studying, keep talking, search ideas, you know, that's what you have to keep doing. It's what you're doing already.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Any other hand I've not got.
So, thank you, Joy. While I was listening to your lecture.
Sorry, who are you?
My name is Mustain Zain. So the function of criticism that you have been trying to elaborate, that what it does to us and to our culture, and it opens up the possibility of meaningful conversation. But it is a liberal promise, right? And it's not just talking. There are people talking, but it is all the more important that whose voice gets heard. And there is the question of power and structural limitations. So why I'm saying it, because you have been you're right in criticizing the current dispensations and the problem, but the most difficult problem that I'm troubled with is those who had the power in Bangladesh, at least in the last one decade. They had the privilege, they had the power, they had the instrument. A large section of the society did not really find that what was going on was troubling, and it was their duty to actually criticize or actually try to make meaningful conversation for the people to advance freedom and accountability. But that's not the issue what I wanted to say. Now that we have this new opening, I did not really see one person or an institution really came forward and said, now we look back, now we had these reflections, and there were a lot of things that we could avoid it. We could have avoided, but we did not. There is no such thing in Bangladesh. While we are talking about, of course, there are failures, there are problems that Indian government must be held accountable. But what about this section of the society? And it is not just speaking truth to power. There is a much more deeper problem here in Bangladesh, right? The second thing is, it's much more troubling. Now you see, whatever happened, there is a section of the society, they simply do not accept and admit even to begin with. They simply refuse to think. You are talking about criticism, you are talking about liberal promise. When you have a large section of the society refuse to think.
A large section.
Large section, refuse to even think. They deny the very fact of enforced disappearances, the very fact of this atrocious crime. And not only that, it's not just denying, that defaming, that even the very uprising, the very demand and aspirations of trying to make change. Of course, change is a massive thing. It doesn't actually happen overnight. There are a lot of troubles. I understand the sentiment. I do also share the sentiment. So the problem of defaming the whole purpose of asking for change has been leveled so many things, How as a society we deal with that? Now, last but not the least, as you said, criticism has a function of making accountable. And accountability. There's a whole process of accountability measures, legal and otherwise. And then they're trying to discredit and destabilize it. So as a society, in order to have this liberal promise, opening up this space, how do we tackle these three things?
I'm going to try to bind them all together. I don't know, but I do think, for what it's worth, I think the students made a big mistake. The students had the moral authority. They were the moral center of Bangladesh at that moment during the Long July. This is easy to say in hindsight. But this experiment of thinking about that, what might have been, could be instructive in suggesting what direction we go in. In my view, they threw away that moral authority. They did it even in branding. They call themselves NCP. Nothing to do with Long July. I mean, there was a brand that was so powerful. People apparently across political divides, coming together for one oddly small reason, the quota, which was very important. But it was one reason, and then that wedge broadened into a bigger wedge until it became Hasina must go. That moral authority just was, it was just thrown away. And, you might not see me tomorrow, but there there is no reason why we can't have a revolution every day. It doesn't have to be destructive in any way, but we can decide we're going to have the conditions in which the people are ready to go to the streets, not in the way of hartals and shut down this and that because someone hasn't given out dissent or whatever in some nonsense piece of paper that isn't going to matter anyway because nobody cares. Not that, but because we've all rallied around some basic idea. We decide that this constitutional reform or that economic reform or the dismantling of oligarchs, something which many people can rally around. We make that, we need big wins, but not. We have to be strategic in exactly the way that the students were. They were, but then they decided to do something that they hadn't any experience of, that they didn't have a moral claim to. I don't know, I don't want to criticize them too much because, they are the heart of what is potential, and they will come back. I think they will come back.
On that note, and a very hopeful note, that the revolution must go on. Every day is a revolution. I think these are the words we want to hear. But I'm disappointed with the audience on one thing. Zia Haider Rahman had mentioned that he's contracted to write 2 books. And we haven't asked him what those books are going to be about. So somebody else was saying that literature, fiction, is like, tells the future. So I think this revolution will go on, they'll be back. Maybe there's a fiction to be written, a novel to be written, and for us to look forward to another great tome that we might all enjoy. With that, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our seminar on the politics of literature. On behalf of Bangla Academy, I thank all our guests, participants, and audience for being with us today. Thank you.